If you're not prepared, they will get in. Because it's not if, it's when the hacker's going to get in your business one way or another. Cybersecurity insurance is more important today than it ever has been. You have to have the right things in place so that policy will pay when you need it. Cybersecurity is tactical and compliance is strategy. Am I meeting those controls? Because if you're not monitoring and not looking at it, then you don't know what's happening real time. 90% of all hacks is caused due to the lack of training. That's where hackers target 90% of the time. Have a plan. Put the tools in place. If you don't, they will own your business. If you're not prepared, they will get in. Because it's not if, it's when the hacker's going to get in your business one way or another. Cybersecurity insurance is more important today than it ever has been. You have to have the right things in place so that policy will pay when you need it. Cybersecurity is tactical and compliance is strategy. Am I meeting those controls? Because if you're not monitoring and not looking at it, then you don't know what's happening real time. 90% of all hacks is caused due to the lack of training. That's where hackers target 90% of the time. Have a plan. Put the tools in place. If you don't, they will own your business. If you're not prepared, they will get in. Because it's not if, it's when the hacker's going to get in your business one way or another. Cybersecurity insurance is more important today than it ever has been. You have to have the right things in place so that policy will pay when you need it. Cybersecurity is tactical and compliance is strategy. Am I meeting those controls? Because if you're not monitoring and not looking at it, then you don't know what's happening real time. 90% of all hacks is caused due to the lack of training. That's where hackers target 90% of the time. Have a plan. Put the tools in place. If you don't, they will own your business. If you're not prepared, they will get in. Because it's not if, it's when the hacker's going to get in your business one way or another. Cybersecurity insurance is more important today than it ever has been. You have to have the right things in place so that policy will pay when you need it. Cybersecurity is tactical and compliance is strategy. Am I meeting those controls? Because if you're not monitoring and not looking at it, then you don't know what's happening real time. 90% of all hacks is caused due to the lack of training. That's where hackers target 90% of the time. Have a plan. Put the tools in place. If you don't, they will own your business.
Well, look at there. Here we go. What's up, David?
Not much. How are you doing today, Wayne?
I can't hear you.
Thanksgiving's just
There you
around the
go.
corner.
There he is. Yeah, I'm telling you.
All right.
I take it, coming into this, we are coming live to everyone out there. Appreciate everyone joining us here on our LinkedIn Live. Bear with us. This is our second time doing on LinkedIn Live. We're still tweaking a few things, and hopefully this comes off a little bit better than our first one we did. But we got a lot of good results from our first one. And David, today's topic is an interesting one, to say the least. We are going to talk about IT strategy and talking about putting in a technology plan for that strategy. Now, I've had a lot of people come up and say, hey, we're going to talk about this, but man, that's a big topic, And yeah, it is, but it doesn't have to be this monstrous thing. We can really simplify what we need to do here. And by having this in place, the clients, I don't know about you, but the clients I see that actually do this, even at a high level, have a they're better in touch with their business, and employees are better off, clients are better off, because everybody's on the same plate.
Right.
Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think anytime you have a plan and work towards a common goal, everybody's better off for it.
I think
You can't complete a marathon if you don't take the first step. And taking the first step of this process isn't always the easiest thing to do, but it's an important step.
it's kind of like the IT, it's kind of like the old movie, everybody just shies away from it,
Yeah,
It's like, oh,
yeah,
that's a necessary evil over there.
yeah,
But
yeah.
in today's world, um, it really needs to be talked about even more, right?
For sure. Yeah,
Is
absolutely.
because with cybersecurity insurance, with all the changes we see out there from the industry standards and compliance standards, risk management standards, it's changing so fast. And if you don't have a plan on how you're going to live with the change, you're so left behind, and it puts you at a disadvantage from being able to compete in business, actually.
It does.
Worse now
It
than it
does.
ever did. So what we want to do here is we're going to take you through a high level of what is, because there's a lot of folks ask me, says, how do I get started? What do I need to do? What's the common things that are mistakes, things of that nature. So we wanted to put this short presentation together about how do you effectively plan and budget from a technology standpoint. And you're going to be surprised that it's more in line with your vision and your mission and your business objectives than you realize. Because that's what
Agreed.
the IT technology is for, is to
Yep.
help you run business, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's what we're going to really get into here. So from an agenda standpoint, we're going to go into the next piece and next slide there. And let's see, let me move my next slide there. Okay. So in our agenda, we're going to talk about what is the technology plan, what's the benefits of a technology plan, components that make it up, why is aligning it with your business objectives crucial. And then we're going to really spend a little time on that. How do you ensure I'm staying aligned? And we get into that a lot because of the risk management we do, because really doing risk management, it's got to be aligned with the strategy or it doesn't
Right.
work, right? And
Right.
what are the common, pitfalls that we can get into, and how do we avoid them? So that's really the topics that we're going to go through today. Is there anything you really want to highlight that you want to make sure people really kind of think about as we're going through this agenda here, David?
Yeah, what I want to highlight is the fourth point there. Why is aligning tech with business objectives crucial? If you don't know what your business objectives are, let's get that done first. Because you can't align technology without knowing what business goals you're trying to accomplish. You can't prioritize one piece of technology over another if you aren't certain what your future looks like from a business perspective. So, technology is designed to assist the business processes, help you achieve the business objectives. You shouldn't design technology and then put a business plan together after that. That just doesn't work. I've seen
Yeah.
people try it, it doesn't work.
Well, and that's where people overspend and buy stuff they don't
Right,
need.
exactly.
And we see that
Yep.
all the time is they go and you get all this stuff, and it doesn't matter if it's a small mom and pop sole proprietor or a large enterprise, big universities. I've seen universities where they come in and they purchased a whole bunch of stuff because the sales guy told them, hey, you need this. And then we got it.
Yeah.
When we went and implemented for them, there was 2/3 of it was like, okay, we don't need any of that. Why did you buy it? Well, we was told we need to have it. Based on what? Right?
Exactly.
So it's not just
Exactly.
the little guys that have this problem. The big guys have this problem.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Technology is really cool, but you need to understand how that technology is solving a business problem or helping you achieve a business objective.
100% agree. So let's dive into this a little bit. And, what is a technology plan? Well, the basic definition, a technology plan outlines your organization's tech related goals and initiative. But let's drive it down a little bit more into, what makes up the technology plan. So one of the things is right off the bat, if you're going to build a plan, first thing you need to do is like exactly what David just said. Review your organization's missions, goals, and current opportunities and challenges. What are you trying to do in your business? If I'm sitting here and I'm a copier sales guy and I'm running a business that sells copiers, okay, my plan is to bring that technology to the end customer, sell it to them, deploy it, and have them pay me for what I'm doing. Well, what does it take to do that? Well, it's not just a sales guy going out there and sales. I've got to have a relationship with a vendor. I got to have the process for getting quotes and procurement and delivery and implementation, track what's done, what's not done, who's doing it, when did it get done, when did it complete, when did I invoice, did I get paid? All of these are processes for running your business. Now, once I know that process, now I can go into my next step and I can assess what is it going to take to accomplish those steps, right?
Or increase efficiency in those steps.
Exactly. Whether you're starting a new one or you're already running this. And this is one of the things you really got to think about is, okay, if I got this and I'm running, what do I need to be doing? And is there technology in hand? Am I using a technology I have already the correct way? Because sometimes you may already have the technology. You're just not using a piece of the technology that has the capability because you don't know it and coming into those things. So that's where you get into how do you evaluate the technology to deliver that plan? So let's take an example. David, we do risk management for customers, right? And I built out a plan about a whole program I wanted to go off and run. Well, we knew what the program was, but when I handed it to you and I had some base products already in there when you come on board, I had a plan, kind of had a base framework of this. What was the first thing you did? Because basically, even in a department of a company, you got to have a plan, a technology plan. It's not just the whole company. Depending on your size, it could be multiple different ones. It's got to add up to a top level plan.
Exactly. Yep. And that was what I did. I've been into a lot of situations, and this instance was no different, where people have a plan based on things they've heard from other people that may not be as formulated or formatted as well as it can be. Having two sets of eyes on one goal is always valuable. And I think that's what you're getting at, right, Wayne?
Well, not only that, but when you looked at it and you say, okay, I said, okay, we want to deliver on, assessments to help the customer know where they're sitting at. Okay.
Yeah.
This is what we want to deliver to them. So we laid out a plan on that, but now we had to make sure we had the right tools in place to go off and do that. So one, you had to evaluate what we already had.
Yep.
Then we found as we wanted to go and expand, it was okay for what we were doing. But just like what we're talking about, the next piece is like, okay, yeah, you can evaluate what you're doing, but your business, you're planning on it to grow. So you can't look at now only. You got to look at now and where I want to be.
Yeah.
Will the technology take me there? And so even though I had put tools in place that took care of the now and a short run, you had to come in and reevaluate that and say, okay, with everything that we're doing, and we take that to scale,
Yeah.
you started finding limitations, right?
Started finding limitations and realized we had to come up with a different plan. We had to alter the plan. And that
Oh,
happens in every
you meant
business
we
too.
changing a plan? Oh, wow. I didn't know we was going to have to change plan in midstream,
Yeah.
but
And
that's,
every company goes through the same sort of thing, right?
yeah,
Where they use tool A for 6 years. That's the tool they use. Well, tool B would be really cool and it adds all this extra stuff and could replace A plus some. But I've got a contract with a vendor for 2 more years on plan A. Does it make sense to stop using that tool when I still have to pay for it for 2 more years? You have a contractual obligation to stay with a certain tool or certain technology. No, it's worth evaluating what might be able to get you further along using that tool plus something else. But picking that something else requires knowing what the 5 year plan is so you're not locked into the same situation.
exactly.
You don't want overlap of your tools. You don't want to pay for too many things. I've been in situations where you walk in and there's 3 different antiviruses running and 2 different anti-malware programs running, 3 different backup processes running. Without a grasp of what you're doing as a business, it's really hard to develop a profitable business. And that's where the technology plan is going to help you.
So we get that implemented and coming into it. And part of where you went was we had a plan, we started going down it. And then when you got in, all of a sudden you had to come up with another plan.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a process to reevaluate at some period to see if we're still on
We
plan?
do. Yeah,
Okay.
we do.
What does that
Um,
look like? What are we talking about there? Because I see a lot of people, it's kind of like the set it and forget it mode.
yeah,
And with
it's easy.
technology, the
It's
biggest thing
easy
about
to do.
technology, if there's one thing that never changes with it, technology, is the fact that it changes all the time.
Yep. Yeah, so one thing that I do that I think is a very uncommon perspective is keep lines of communications open with the vendors. You never know who's going to come up with that next best thing. Keep an eye out on the newer thing. I mean, we stay in touch with our industry, right, Wayne? We're watching webinars all the
Yeah.
time. We're learning about this. We have reps calling us all the time to talk to us about other stuff. We're always staying on the cutting edge of technology, and that's important to us. If I'm manufacturing widgets, I'm staying on top of the widget industry. I know what's hot. I know where the trends are going, and I'm very aware of that being a big business objective for me to sell more widgets. Um,
I think it's
Keeping
important.
lines of communication are critical. I mean, you might have one rep with a company that you swear you're never going to do business with them at all. They might move to another company that has a great tool. And if you've burned that bridge, you may not have the opportunity that you could with something else. But you never know what you're going to find without talking to people.
Now, everything we're talking about here, it's a lot of work, right? It's not something
Mhm.
that you can just, you know, go off and depending on what you're doing. And if you're sitting here and you're running your business and it's not, you don't have the IT staff or you have one person that's in this, it takes more than one. You got to have different aspects of it because not only is it the technical aspect of what you got to understand, but also how you translate that to business impact
Mhm.
and understanding that side of it. Now I understand that the technology is doing this work, but how does that affect the business outcome? How can
Mhm.
I determine that this is doing the job I need to do to get my business outcome that makes money and makes my EBITDA where I want it to be? Right.
Yep.
So you've got to look at it. It's several pieces to it. And a lot of people, even in the IT business, we know a lot of people in IT running managed services companies. They're technology guys. They're often doing this, but they run into a wall because they don't understand how to translate to the business side and be able to
Yeah.
make those changes. We've seen it happen. And so it doesn't affect just the CPA firm or this, it affects IT companies too. So we all have to be aware that we have to do these things. So
Yeah.
we've talked about what it is, what the area is, what it's doing, but what is the actual benefits of doing these things? All right. So we talk about strategic alignment. We talk about resource optimization, which you kind of brought up. I talk about risk management, innovation and growth. We'll expand on that, and competitive advantage. So how does this put me into these different things? So I'm going to take competitive advantage to start with. Okay. For me, I'm looking at for the business owner, understanding IT, but being the business owner. For me, my competitive advantage is I'm more efficient. I'm able to turn things quicker. I know where things are in the process in delivering what we do to our client. That's my job, is to make sure the engine's doing that, because that gives me the competitive advantage over others, right? Being able to get answers, understanding the technology, staying up on it, being able to deliver those things, and that's enabling that customer's business to be successful. What I'm doing is impacting them, so I got to make sure that's aligned. That gives me a competitive advantage over others, okay? Because we take that. So in that, that's my end goal, is that for me, if I got that competitive advantage, that's my objective with the customer, right? So I'm building out my plan to that piece right there, because that's important. Same thing for the CPA. Their competitive advantage has got to be they can deliver, they can help them with their finances better than the next person can. Doing those things, saving them money on making sure they got the right things, written off when they need to be and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yep.
Same thing. Well, how does the technology help them get there? So that's what we're looking at. But when we talk about innovation and growth, what does that mean to you? I know what it means to me, but what does that mean to you when you're putting your plan together for what we do in risk management?
Very similar to what you talked about in competitive advantage. That feeds into the competitive advantage. We need to be a leader in what we do. We need to be able to provide value to the clients at the lowest cost possible. So we have to be efficient in what we do. We can't be lazy. We can't do things cheaply, but we have to do things efficiently. So if we can find a tool that can scan an environment in 3 hours and give us a report that we can translate in an hour and a half, we've got 4.5 hours into an analysis of an environment that may take 8 or 10 hours using another tool. There's 4.5 hours of productivity that you've been able to streamline by using innovations that are new.
Cool.
Everything's easier. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off. I just noticed there's a question from the LinkedIn community. How do you assess whether technology investment will provide a return on investment? Great question.
Yeah.
All right. So in most people, when they go purchase something, they put it out there, they forget about it. They just, they pay for it and they go look at it. All right. What we do is when we evaluate technology and we're going to deploy, what is the cost of that technology? What is the longevity of that technology and that? Now, that's one piece. That's just raw cost. But what's the actual return? I got to understand how it's enabling the business to make money.
Right.
One thing could be, if I'm looking at it, how I streamline workflow in a business process, do I reduce the amount of time it takes an individual to get that job done? If I do, now I can take that employee's time, what their salary base is, how long it took them to do it before, reduce it. Now I saved that much time. Now I got that return on investment of time saving. That cost number, I apply that to what my cost was of doing it. And then I can project when my return on investment goes break even to move where I'm ahead of the game. Okay. So you actually, that question goes to the heart of strategic alignment. It goes to the heart of making a plan about understanding my business process. What does it take to do that process? Now, how is technology going to allow me to streamline that, make it more efficient? Can I do more things with one person? For example, if I'm going in and I'm processing orders, right? and I'm doing it the old manual way with spreadsheets and everything like this, well, one person can only process so much. So I got to have another person go and process it. But then if I actually use the tool sets of implementing, a platform, a CRM, any of these pieces, and aligning those processes with the billing process, with the application, and streamlining that, now one person can process 5 times what they did before because I've automated that process. I've got the reconciliation automated to where now it's a review process to go do that. Well, now I can take 4 resource hours, that employee, take that against that, and now I can determine what my ROI is. I become more efficient. So when you want to look at technology, you got to look at how it's going to affect your business workflow and your process and what that cost is. What is that cost savings there? Now, if I'm selling the same amount or more, now that's going to increase my EBITDA because my operational cost has decreased. That's where I'm seeing return on investment. So you got to understand your numbers. You got to understand your business and your process flow to be able to understand how technology gives you that return on investment.
Yep.
You got anything to add to that? I try to make sure I kind of tied that
Yeah,
together.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly with that. I got a good example that I guess came up from, we can't determine your return on investment. We can help you with that calculation, but we're not going to be able to tell you that. That's really something that you've got to be able to determine. But there are a lot of snake oil salesmen out there. And if somebody walks into the door and you're a manufacturer and they can sell you a machine for $120,000 that is going to make you produce twice as many widgets, you would buy it if you could justify the $120,000 price tag. What you don't always know is what comes with that $120,000 price tag. It probably isn't just going to plug in and start spitting out twice as many widgets. So your return on investment isn't just the cost of the machinery, it's the implementation, it's the support, it's the ongoing maintenance, it's everything else. That's where we've really been able to provide value in the past by being kind of a sounding board, as it were, or an outside consultant, helping you see the potholes that are in the road of having a successful deployment of something that's going to help you along the way. And it's true with every industry, whether it's technology, strictly software, ERP solutions, CRM solutions can be a huge black hole or a money pit that you pour money into over and over and over again. It still doesn't get you the results you want because you didn't create that plan first. You didn't decide what you needed the ERP to do or what the CRM to do and have a solution built to accomplish the goal. You just said, hey, that's new technology. It's going to save me millions. I'm going to buy it. That's the wrong way to approach anything.
It doesn't matter if it is I'm setting up backup or recovery, and I'll take the analogy from backup recovery to an ERP platform. Okay. If I got backup recovery, how I go implement that is going to really determine is what is the business that has the data? What is the data? What is their risk management requirements? What are those things? Because it's going to vary based on industry, based on type of business, based on locality, all that. So while backup recovery is a simple process, how I need to deploy it to affect the business appropriately, I got to understand what the business requirements are. From backup
along those lines,
to the ERP, CRM, a SQL database, it doesn't matter what the technology is. If I don't understand the business direction, the business objectives, what I've got to deploy to make sure that works, none of it's going to work.
Yeah.
So
And
you really
do you know your RTO?
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you're building a backup solution, can you go 3 days without equipment, or can you go 3 minutes without your software?
And that goes all back to the business. I got to understand if you're 7x24 operation, it's a lot different if you're a 8 to 5, 5 days a week type of business. It all varies. So you can assess how return on investment's done in a business, but you got to understand your business to do that. And how we come in, we don't make an assumption. That's probably the first thing that I do in any customer I talk to. Tell me about your business. We got plenty of CPA firms, but every CPA firm I talk to, I have them educate me on their business because because they're a CPA doesn't mean they're doing it the same way as another CPA.
Yeah.
It don't. There's some commonalities, but there's always
Yeah.
variance because their competitive edge, what they're doing from innovation and growth in their business. So those things come up. So let's take another piece about risk management. And this is one of the areas we talk to customers almost daily on. What do we mean by risk management, David?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, first thing you need to know is what the risks are, and that's risks to the business. What's going to jeopardize your profitability? What's going to jeopardize your operations? Once you identify the risks, you need to figure out how you can mitigate that risk as best you can. And there's 17,000 different ways to mitigate any one risk, and they're all related to cost. So if there's a risk that is only going to impact the bottom line slightly, you put that as a lower priority than something that's going to be catastrophic if it were to happen. So risk management is about identifying the risks and then coming up with a plan to address the risks based on the criticality of those risks. That's where the technology plan helps.
It was interesting, and I want your comment on this. A couple of weeks ago, one of my marketing folks come to me and says, "Hey, I was talking to this lady, and we was at lunch. It was at a ladies' meeting, and they were talking about it. And she says, "Well, I want to ask you a question." And this is the lady talking to our marketing manager. Says, will y'all send us information about doing risk assessments and doing this, and that we really need to do this and do risk management and stuff like this. Says, but aren't we at a higher risk if we do a risk assessment and we know what our risks are? Doesn't that put us in jeopardy? And I was at first wanted to say, okay, why would you think knowing about your risk versus not knowing about your risk would put you in more jeopardy? It was hard for me. I had to really sit and think about the question.
Yeah.
And then it dawned on me that what she was asking is, well, if I know about the risk and I don't do nothing about it, does that put me in a worse position of not knowing about the risk? Therefore,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have done anything. And I had to think about that for a second. And what it's funny. I put this in front of one of our insurance companies that we do business with. Yeah. And I told him, I said, from y'all's perspective, what goes on? And then he kind of answered the same way as what we get into when we do risk management for customers, whether it be for, 1070 IRS 1075, or you were doing New York DFS or SOC 2 compliance, whatever it may be. It is knowing the risk is the first step of putting a plan to mitigate the risk. And by having a plan to do it, puts you in a much better standpoint than not knowing about it at all, or getting a risk assessment and then not doing anything. So what do we mean by when we talk about saying put a plan in place, which we call it POAM, Plan of Action and Milestone? What do we mean by that?
When we go in and we assess an environment, we identify the risks. Some of the risks are easy to knock off. They don't cost anything. We have to change a procedure here. We have to do something a little bit different here on the Windows settings on all the machines. They don't cost you anything. They just need to be done. There are other things that cost a lot of money, depending upon the framework you need to adhere to, depending upon the cyber insurance policy you may have. So you may have something that calls out internal penetration testing quarterly. So you say, okay, that sounds fairly easy. Quarterly, that's only 4 times a year. That shouldn't be too bad. And you go out and get some quotes and you find out it's $15,000 every 3 months to have an internal penetration test done. Well, you've got to weigh the pros and cons of patching that risk, patching that vulnerability versus going out of business or making payroll. There is always the opportunity to say something on that risk management plan, something on that risk mitigation plan is something I just can't afford right now. I'm going to put it down. I'm going to attach a price to it. I'm going to keep it on the horizon. And if I make a landfall deal and I'm rolling in cash, I'm going to patch that hole. But until then, I'm aware of it. I may try to find mitigating risks or mitigating controls to try to minimize that risk, but I can't wipe that risk out because I can't afford to wipe that risk out.
And
That's
sometimes those
acceptable.
risks, and to that point, sometimes the risks that you find that's this big issue, 9 times out of 10 is it's I got vulnerabilities because I didn't do some of the simple things
Yeah.
that I should be doing. And if I go back and say, okay, instead of just going and saying, I got to spend all this money to go fix that right now, it is, okay, what are the other things that I'm not doing? If I do those, how does that affect that? For example, is everything we talk about security, and it's actually I'm gonna tie this into the question we just got asked because it's kind of where I'm going.
Yeah.
The question was, how do you approach cybersecurity in a budgeting process to ensure you're allocating enough resources to mitigate potential risk? Which, great question. And really where I'm going into this is it comes back to that risk and coming to understand it is there's some base level things that everyone should do
Yep.
because cybersecurity insurance, what it calls out is a basis of just about every framework that we deal with in out there. And it's all it goes is having multi-factor authentication, having
Right.
EDR, endpoint detection response, having managed detection response, having password management, having privileged access management, deployment, and all this. So how do we come into that? And I start talking to people about budgeting cybersecurity and how they put it into place. Well, the first thing I talk about is, there's paid Gartner reports that you can get, and they've done these industry analysis. And coming from the enterprise space, I've had a lot of access to those type of reports. And on industry average, the lowest amount of revenue spend to IT that you put this budget to is 5% of revenue. Okay. You take 5% of revenue, and that's what you're looking at your annual budget to go apply. And that can vary based on industry. Some of the highest is 18 to 20%, depending on the industry. Okay. Coming into this. So one of the things you first do in budgeting is I look at like a customer working with us, we have a minimum a stack of cybersecurity we're going to put in place because if us as an MSP, we sign a contract to take care of a customer's environment. At that point in time, an MSP has accepted shared responsibility and shared liability of that environment. So if I'm going to take on that responsibility, I want to make sure we're doing the minimum subset of what a security stack needs to be in place to go do this. And you go budget those things and go put it in place. So you're going to have your EDR, your MDR, you're going to have your backup, you're going to have those things in place to go do this. So you budget that and you start looking at those things. We can lay out that budget based on those requirements. I would base all my budgeting at a minimum of what is cybersecurity insurance requirements. There's about 8 specific things that you have to have in place. If you don't, most likely your cybersecurity insurance policy will not ever pay out.
Yep.
Because they are required in every policy, whether you know it or not. And 9 times out of 10, the actual insurance broker agent that sold it to you, 9 times out of 10 don't know what the requirements are inside that policy. The underwriters do, but not sales agents. That's one of those questions we always ask. What am I signing up to? So those basic things I'm going to plan for. EDR, MDR, privileged access management, password manager, multi-factor authentication, backup copy offsite on mutable storage, backup restore testing, recovery testing, that is a requirement. And depending on what state you're in now, you have to have a SIEM. SIEM. Okay. That right there monitors logs and that for looking for detection like DDoS attacks, what someone moving east-west in your network, things of that nature. Those are some of the basic things that are asked for. Those are some of the basic things you should plan for in budgeting for it. And if that's a question that you need help with, reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to help you. But great question. But for cybersecurity, those are the basic level things I'd be planning for from a budgeting standpoint. And it sounds like 5% of revenue's a lot, but we have sole proprietor CPA firms that's our clients, and their budget, and we have cybersecurity in there with help desk, and we're costing them about 2.5%. So we're half of what industry standard is to that cost. So it is very doable, even for a sole proprietor.
One thing I'll add to that too, Wayne, when they talk about 5% being the average, that's 5% of very successful companies. That's not people like Wayne and I saying you should spend 5% of your revenue. No. These are real numbers coming from real companies that are Fortune 5000 companies. So it's real data. The successful companies are spending this much money on their IT budgets. And it's very true that it does vary by industry.
It does.
If you're an e-tailer, if you sell online, you're paying a lot more in your cybersecurity than somebody that's doing manufacturing, let's say.
It all varies depending on that. So that's those things you go and do. But, from a basis of what you're going to budget for, I'd start with cybersecurity insurance requirements at a minimum across the board.
Well, I think what you and I have both seen, that's kind of the low-hanging fruit, right?
It is.
It doesn't matter if it's cybersecurity, cyber insurance, liability insurance, or a basic framework. That's the low-hanging fruit. That's the bare minimum.
Okay, so what we're going to do is let's go and now. Great question. Keep the questions coming. Let's go to what I want to do is so let's talk about the components that makes up a technology plan. Now, we've been talking about the various different things. We've covered some of these, but what we want to do is, one, we keep talking about it. What is the current technology you have in place? Let's assess what you have, okay? And let's see how that applies to your business today. Because then that's where it kind of comes in. It's kind of like when you was talking about, I already had something, you come in, evaluate it. We need to make a change. We need to go tweak. We need to go make some moves. So the first thing is, let's evaluate what you got. You may have the technology you need. It just might need to be tweaked to meet what you need to go do and streamline that. Big thing you're going to hear throughout this whole thing, documentation. You have to document these things, and that way you can track these things, okay? What's the technology goals and objectives? Obviously, that right there is, okay, here's the technology I have. What's the goals and objectives the technology needs to meet? Okay. Budget resource allocation. All right. How am I going to allocate the budget to meet those technology goals? Sometimes you may be spending a lot on something, but what you really need is half of that. Let's go deployment, redeploy, let's free up budget, and then determine if that budget needs to be used there or if it goes back to operationals. That's where we're looking at the allocation of that. How does it work? Technology roadmap. Take us through that, David.
Well, the simple thing is keeping your technology current, right? So establishing what your baseline is for how long you want to keep computers in service. Some people say, well, I want to keep computers in service until they break. Well, when they break, you're out of commission. You have one worker that can't work until that workstation is replaced. So coming up with a plan to replace your technology is very important, to be proactive on making sure that your equipment is going to run when somebody pushes start. Because at the end of the day, the computer doesn't make businesses run. The people behind them make things run. If they can't do their work because there's a system down, a computer down, or a switch failed, that's costing you money every minute that they're unable to do their job. So developing that technology roadmap, getting an understanding of what your tolerance to things not working is an important part of how we help you with that technology roadmap. But it's not just about the hardware, it's the software too. So let's figure out, are you using the right software? Are you keeping it current? All that falls into the technology roadmap planning.
The biggest thing that, we hear all the time, we run into every day is, we've got hardware. It's like, well, my computer's running fine, but they're sitting on Windows 7. Okay, it may be working. It might be still running this little program you had, DOS program, that's running time clocks. Hey, it's working. But from a perspective of how does that apply into my risk management, that's a glaring hole. I've opened the business up to major risk for two things. One, I can't patch that system.
Yep.
I can't upgrade the software on it because the newer versions of that software won't run on that box.
Yep.
So now I've run into a spot, if I don't keep with that technology roadmap, then I get to a point where I got to do this major uplift.
Yep. And it's unplanned, right? So you don't have budget for
Bingo.
it. You're not ready for it.
Exactly.
That becomes a problem.
Exactly. That's part of that roadmap, that budget and planning is that resource allocation is understanding when does something go end of life? Does it have extended support that meet the requirements? Now I have my window that I need to replace it. Now, sometimes that window doesn't change. Sometimes hardware, if you're in environments that's using virtualization, well, virtualization really skews that because now how it works on it, I may get a server to run for 10 years and I'm fine because the virtualization software is supporting it for that long and it's meeting all the requirements that I need to go do. Hey, great. I can get longevity out of equipment. That's where you start looking at this and saying, based on the business, how can I do this and support those things? But it's always going to be evaluating. And then how does that affect you in the budgeting resource allocation is when you're setting this roadmap and I'm setting this equipment and it's got a lifespan of 5 years. Well, now I got a depreciation schedule I apply that to. And I can depreciate that over that period of time. I have some advantages of that to the business and how now that drives to my ROI of it. Or if it's certain type of technology, I take a 179 expense at the end of the year. And I get that one time. Which way is better for the end business? And that helps me understand how I'm getting that ROI on that and how I need to evaluate. What's the time period to evaluate across things I need. So it's not just I buy a piece of equipment, I got this roadmap and go do this. This is how we start tying it back into the business. So implementation plan. When we talk about implementation plan, most people think, well, I'm implementing one time and I go off and do this. But the implementation plan to me is I deployed it into the environment. I set the computer, I go do that, put the software. Well, that's the base level of the infrastructure deployment. But the other thing that people don't think about is when I bring on a new user into the environment, how do I implement them into the use of the technology to help them do their job in the business? I need to understand that part of the implementation plan because that happens every time I hire someone. And that affects the technology, licensing of technology. Does the hardware infrastructure I have underneath it support that amount of resource utilization? So that's always something that's got to be evaluated as you go along, because at some point, I'm going to exceed the capability or the licensing capability of this. And now I got additional budgeting, resource allocation I got to do.
Yep.
So now it brings into that monitoring, the evaluation and metrics to it. So someone was asking about how do I budget the resources? Part of that is I got to understand how I'm using the resources. So if I'm tracking that I'm able, if I've got I got users and I'm using remote desktop services, internal servers, and I can put, based on the style of servers, I can put 20 people on one server. And then I got to implement another server and the licensing associated with that. Now I got one of my metrics I'm evaluating. If I look at it and I size it and I see, based on utilization, I can actually get 25. That metric affects what my allocation is. That's what we're talking about, an evaluation of metrics of the technology. It's coming against the business and the resource utilizations based on how the business growth or shrink is. Same thing about removing a user, correct? When I remove that user, there's some allocations that don't go away. Like I want to archive their email. Well, that's still taking up space. I want to archive their file shares. That's still taking space. But their resource utilization of a system frees up. So just because I take one away doesn't mean I've got 100% of that away compared to I add a new user, well, that's 100% add-on type
Yeah.
thing. So those are things that we look at it. So in the last piece, David, when you think about continuous improvement, what does that mean in this context to you?
Yeah, I think in this context, you have the technology plan, right? At the end of the technology plan is perfection. You know, if you had unlimited funds and unlimited resources, you would have everything on your plan, you'd be good to go. That's not realistic. What is realistic is the expectation that you'll continually improve your environment. You'll pick and choose what risks to remediate, what vulnerabilities to patch, what risks to manage, and you'll continue working towards that end goal. Now, that goal is always going to move. Unfortunately, that goal doesn't stay stagnant because things change, technology changes, your business changes. You could be chugging along at a really good pace, and all of a sudden you have an opportunity to buy a company that's going to add 20% to your bottom line. You're probably going to take that opportunity, right? But it is going to put stress on your environment, and all of a sudden your plan changes, your goals change. So making sure that you're doing continuous improvement is just a part of compliance, part of a technology plan, part of growing a business.
Wow, that's a great question. Just come in. What KPIs should businesses track to ensure technology budget is being spent efficiently and effectively? That's a big question. That's a
That's a
big
huge
question.
question.
Um, what I will say, because it can vary a lot. That's one of the things where I look at it from each business and I got to understand what's going on. But I'll put some basics to it. One, do you have a budget for your environment, for your company? Do you have a budget? You know what you're spending money on to operate, to run your business. Do you got your salaries, you got your rent, you got your technology. When you implement that technology, how's that allocated to those folks? So I have a spreadsheet that I use that says when I bring an employee on, I know exactly what my burden is for every employee because I take into account vacation time, I take into account sick time, I take into account training time, I take into account training budget. Whether they got health care, we're paying for health care, all these things we calculate in, and then what is their true workable hours? And I know
Mm-hmm.
what my cost, my burden is per hour, per employee. To me, that's a metric. If you don't know that at a minimum, it really puts you at a disadvantage. So when you start talking about KPIs and metrics, there's a lot that you need to understand and go track because I have that basis. So I got a basis cost of my operational cost. That now I go look at what's my sales cost. What does it take me to acquire one client? That brings in all my marketing information, my marketing spend, my sales time, and I close that deal. What's the average size of this deal? What does that cost me to get a client? We track that metric. So I want to understand how efficient my marketing sales team is to acquiring clients. With delivery on the services side, metrics there go from, how many tickets people are processing, how much time are they what's the utilization, or am I running at 70% utilization, or am I running at 8% utilization per employee? And then they come out and say, we're too busy. We need more help. Well, where's all the time going? Is that
Mm-hmm.
because they're not entering their time? Now that tells me something. That tells me, okay, we got something in our workflow broke. We need to go fix. So we're actually capturing that time and we're being more efficient about what we're doing. So probably the thing I would say to help you really start going down that is what is a role? What's the job function? What's the role of that person? What do I gauge that person's ability or that job role, not the person, but the job role? What is the goal for that job role? What is the success? What is the end goal? What is that? What does that look like? What does it take to go do that? Now, I know the steps they need to go take to do that. Now I know what the metrics are. Then I got to determine how I'm going to track that metric. So you got to look at that at every department in the business and how they're being efficient. Because lots of times what you'll find is, and I'm a process freak, so I think this way automatically is, and David knows it, is if I'm doing something manual and someone's doing a job, they're busting their hump, they're busy, they're getting it, but their output is X and they got a backlog of X. Okay, is that because the person's not doing a good job, or is that because I haven't given them the tool sets to go do it? That's part of the KPIs you want to track is output, ability. Are they doing the job? Their output's good. They got a backlog. Okay, how do I get that backlog processed? Is that just add another person on, or can I actually streamline that? That's where that optimization comes in. That's where that evaluates metrics. So first thing I would do is sit down and look at each individual one and understand, how do I track if it's success or failure? Now I know the KPI of it. Now I figure out how to track that. And there's lots of different tools out there, depending on your business, that gives you those abilities. And there's a lot of you can track and build on your own. I've got various different ways that I go off and do it. But that all to figure out the KPIs, you've got to go back to the basic is, what's my business goal and objectives? What's the roles to get it there? What's their job to get to be successful at it? Now I know my KPIs. That also tells me, what do I have to do and supply them from a technology standpoint, business process standpoint, documentation, training, accountability, all those things. Now I can see what those are. And now I can go put them in place and track them. Hopefully that
and then
is.
tying that back into, I think tying that back into technology, you can evaluate technology as to how can this technology enhance this unit's performance, efficiency, output. But it is very important to define all that stuff before you try to figure out how technology is going to benefit you.
Before you ever can determine what a KPI is or what you need, you got to know what your objectives are, or you can't define it. So it's important to understand that process. And hopefully the way I answered that helps. If you want to talk about it more, hey, just reach out and we'll talk about it even more. Be glad to help you with it. So why is it so crucial? I think we've kind of made that pretty apparent, that how you align these things to enable you to be efficient determines how successful you can be. You can be successful. You can be making money, but you could be leaving a lot of money on the table. That's what it means. If somebody else is more efficient and they get a competitive edge, what that means is they're able to do the same thing you're doing, but faster, and therefore they're going to make more money. And it's not because you're doing a bad job. It's just because you don't know how you need to streamline what you're doing to drive that outcome. So that's the reason why it's so crucial to align what you're doing to your business outcome and then track those metrics, as we talk about those KPIs, to make sure something happens. For example, one of the KPIs that I do and metrics I do that kind of helps you this is, we have a budget, a rolling 12-month budget. Every quarter, I get with my CFO and my head of finance, and we sit down, my ops, and we sit down and we review what's happened over those 3 months. And we look at a rolling standpoint. How is things affecting us? What's my labor efficiency ratio? That's telling me how efficient, for every man hour of work I do, how many man hours of work do I get the bill for? Okay. How efficient am I in that process? If I got more man hours to do work than the work I'm doing, then I'm not very efficient. And the dollars will actually drive that out if you track it from your system. So that's my first level at a budget level across the whole company, is how are we doing? I got management labor efficiency ratio on the services side, and the sales side, the marketing side. We track every bit of that and understand. And I can see when we do that month to month, when we go make a change, add on new service and go deploy, or make a change in a tool set that's helping us deliver a service that we're already delivering better, I can see its effect almost real time from my financial numbers because I'm tracking it that way. There's a really great book out there called Simple Numbers, and then there's Simple Numbers 2.0. It'll give you a totally different way of looking how to track financial numbers and understand how to see something, because a lot of people look at your financials, they'll look at it over a year and then make a decision. And, well, based on this year, we didn't do this good. We're going to do it and go forward. We're going to put a plan for next year. And we're going to go do this. You can't see something impact you that quick in that scenario. But if you change and look at it from a rolling 12 months, 3 months, 1 month, and understand you have those metrics in place, it changes the world. So just from that perspective alone has changed it for me. And now I understand is in the compliance department, if David's got these tools going to deploy and we're going to sell, I can see how efficient we are, not only in selling the service, but delivering the service. The tool sets we've got in place helps us. I can see the impact of it on ROI. And I'm looking at it from a P&L standpoint. So you don't have to be all down deep into technology to see it. You can still have that. As long as you got it lined up and equated to it, you can see it up at that financial side as well.
Yeah.
Hopefully that helps on that question there. So with that, David, steps to ensure alignment. Let's go through. I'm gonna let you run through these. I'm gonna take a break here and let you run through it, because that last one, someone asked me about KPIs. I just love it, dude. I can go on that all day long.
Yeah, you killed that. That's for sure. I think the best thing on here is the title, Steps to Ensure Alignment. It's going to take a lot of steps. It's not going to happen overnight. There's no magic wand. But don't start your journey without knowing your destination. Let us help you develop that technology plan, and we'll help you. We might not be able to help you with all the definition of your business goals and objectives, but we can help you put it to paper, right? We can help you build that out from your perspective. And then aligning the IT strategy with business goals, that's where we excel. Once you know your business goals, let us help you with the technology roadmap. And I can tell you one of the things that really drew me to Wayne, and one of the big reasons I'm coming to work for him, is he may understand that the industry average is 5% of your annual revenue. He's not going to milk you for every penny of that 5% and say, hey, you still have $5,000 you need to spend this month to hit that goal. He's going to sell you what you need. And that's the type of person I am too. We're not going to oversell things and make you do things that don't accomplish a business goal or a business objective. We're going to get you what you need. And if we come in below budget, we feel like we've accomplished our job. We've done our job. Mm-hmm. It's not about hitting those numbers. It's about doing the best you can within that range, because you never know, one goal that you projected to be a $10,000 cost ends up being a $7,500 cost, and the next one that's $10,000 ends up being $15,000. We know that if we can save money here, that's good, because we may need to spend it somewhere else to get something else done. The technology assessment is an important part of understanding. So you've got your business objectives, you've got your IT strategy. Where are you today? What's it going to take to complete that plan? Prioritize your technology investments, like Wayne talked about. You know your KPIs. You know what's important to the business. So let's prioritize the technology investments to maximize those KPIs. Developing a detailed IT budget. Yeah, you got to spend $150,000 in IT next year. No, this is what you need next year. Line by line, this is what you need to spend. It'll add up to whatever number it adds up to. You determine how much of that dollar amount you're going to be able to afford first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, throughout the whole year. And we'll help you make those decisions. And then creating the strategic roadmap kind of ties into the other parts of that. What's the most important thing? What's going to maximize my return on investment? We'll work with you to establish that. Establishing an implementation plan is typically going to be a year out. We like to build out a longer horizon, but things change over time. Within a year, we should be able to help you detail exactly what we're going to do over the course of that year. and move things around as necessary. And review and update the plans regularly. That's the continuation of the continuous development process. You've got to stay on top of it. You've got to keep it moving, and it's going to change. And then measure and adjust plans. Make sure that the things you're putting in place are creating the results that you planned them to create.
Cool. So
Hope that was good.
No, that's perfect. It's going to line with what we're talking about. And so what we're going to cover last year is real quick is common mistakes and how to avoid them. And these right here is the main ones that we deal with that really hurts people. Thinking cheap option is always the best. Well, we've got customers that, they buy the cheapest network switches and put them in places they don't belong. And so they're having networking problems all the time. So they have tickets open all the time solving these problems. But if we just go and spent the right money on the right technology, put it in place, one, their productivity would go up because they'd have less problems. They'd spend more time working than having problems because they're spending money on cheap hardware that doesn't solve the problem. That's when they were using last year's budget. A lot of people think about that. There's a reason in enterprise is here's your budget. If it's not spent that year, it goes away. Because what you're talking about there is, well, last year you planned that budget based on what last year is, but this year's a different year and things change. You need to plan for where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
Letting one person handle all IT needs, the IT person's focused from the IT perspective, but you got to align that, remember, with the business goals. So it's got to take two heads at a minimum, not one. That's what that means. And thinking short term. Again, if you plan for this solves my business needs today, where are you going to be at next year? Because I don't know anybody that goes in business that doesn't want to grow. So if I plan for only what I got now and then I go grow it, because as an entrepreneur, I'm growing that business because that means money, I'm going to outgrow what I planned. So you got to be thinking forward, longer term. Those are the biggest four that we see all the time bite people. So from that, man, that hour went by fast. If you got questions, if you want to talk to us, how we can help you in any way, just reach out to us. I know we've shared a link that actually you go there, it actually books directly to my calendar, and you can book time with me. We'd love to help you in any way we can. But hopefully this was educational. Hope this, and if this is something you want to have some more information on, you'd like to hear us talk about this, or if you got ideas you'd like to have us share our thoughts on the next one that we do, share it with us on LinkedIn. And really look forward to talking with you. And y'all have a happy Thanksgiving. Don't try to be in too big a food coma. David, he's already said, no, I can't talk about it. He's going to be food coma.
Yeah.
But I hope everyone has a great time with their families. David, I'll be talking to you again soon, buddy.
Sounds great. Thank you. Take care.
See you, everyone. All right, David, you still there?